Friends, thank you. It's a pleasure to speak before you again. And our subject for today is the benefits of Theosophy. It's in three parts. It's the benefits for those who are unfamiliar with Theosophy. It's the benefits for those who are members and have some familiarity. And then I hope that you will share some of your ideas, because I do not like speaking for this hour-long segment, which I think is somewhat dated, especially when I heard a woman in New York say about a speaker, he spoke for 1 hour with no commercials. So, believe me, there will be a break. So, Theosophy, that magic word for some of us. Somewhat similar to that elderly evangelical lady in the 19th century who found great comfort from the word Mesopotamia, though she didn't know what it meant. So, but it just sounded good. So Theosophy, of course, as you know, Theosophia, God, divine wisdom. HBB has suggested that its meaning, Theosophy was what God taught the angels in that ancient seminary at the time of creation. It was this divine transmission, and it is found at the basis of all the world's religions, all the great philosophies. It is the basis of our study. She gives a great definition. It is the synthesis of science, philosophy, and religion. It really is a synthesis. It is not a new religion or a philosophy or creed, but it is the synthesis of philosophy, religion, and science. HBB also has a comment that you all know your earthly parentage, your earthly succession, but how many of you know your spiritual lineages? And this is one point that she makes. She traces back the origins, the original Theosophists. You know, people tend to think of Theosophy as something Eastern or foreign, but she traces its origins back to the ancient Neoplatonists who lived at the beginning of the Christian era. It must have been a wonderful time because many philosophies and religions were mixing, especially in ancient Alexandria, but that was a very cosmopolitan city in Egypt. It was right on the delta and created by Alexander the Great, as we've heard our speaker tell us on Sunday, it's a long time. Though it was a city started by the Greeks, because of its great trading nature, there were people from all over the known world in turn that brought their ideas, and of course Egyptians themselves. And this group of philosophers were called Neoplatonists, but it included among them early Christians, because Christianity had not consolidated its ideas as we know today. So there were people who were Christians who would have the same teachers. The Christian father Origen was a student of Ammonius Saccas, who HPB says is a great figure in our lineage. It included Jews, so early Christians, Egyptian priests, philosophers, and of course Plato, who was the great seminal thinker of his time. And so they adopted these ideas of his, which was mainly about the one, the good, the true, the beautiful, that all things come from this one and different differentiation. And of course emanation plays a part in it. We'll be hearing a talk about emanationism. Is it tomorrow, Janet? Tomorrow, which will give more background. I think one of the interesting things about this conference, this summer school, is how so many talks overlap each other. They explain each other, so to speak, in a very, very emanationist way. They, of course, one of their main identifying features was that they believed in allegory. So, For instance, there were the Greek myths that everyone was familiar with, and they were the Greek mystery schools, the Eleusinian mystery schools, that took common Greek myths that people were familiar with, but gave them another and deeper meaning. The chief being the story of Proserpine. She's the daughter of Demeter, the earth goddess, and she's on this field gathering all these beautiful flowers, and the earth opens up, and she is pulled into the underground by Hades, Pluto, and is kept there. And of course, her mother is terribly distraught, and since she is the earth goddess, the earth mother, nothing grows. Everything begins to wither. And so she goes down to the underworld, and a deal is struck with Hades, where Proserpine, Kore, as she's called in the mystery schools, is able to come up for half of the year and spend time with her mother, and then return back to the underworld. And of course, on one level, this is the story of the seasons. So the earth turns barren because she's mourning the loss of her daughter, and then suddenly there's this tremendous renewal. The ancient peoples were really in tune with the cycles of nature. Nature just wasn't scenery as we think of it today. It wasn't just a tree or a season. It was cycles. They really were in tune with these very subtle cycles, of which here in England, of course, Stonehenge is a remarkable example. Another way of looking at it, though, the deeper way that they taught among themselves, Kore or Proserpine represents ourselves. It's the soul that is suddenly tempted or attracted by this sensate world. All these beautiful flowers attract us, and as we stoop to gather them, we are pulled into this underworld, this dark underworld. And of course, we are constantly looking for that return, the myth of return that we've heard so much about. I just want to look briefly at some of the key ideas, not only of those ancient theosophists, but modern theosophists, because the word theosophy and theosophist starts appearing in the beginning of the millennium. So, some of the basic ideas of theosophy, which of course you are all familiar with, but it's always worth restating. A good idea is always worth restating. So, first, the one, that there is this one ultimate omnipresent reality. There is only the one, as Plato says, and the separateness doesn't exist between us, because technically there only is this unity. There is this divine radiance, and things that we see as separateness, we know the one through cyclicity. We know it through day and night, light and darkness, good and evil. Because of this interplay, all of you are familiar with the yin-yang symbol. This interplay, we know it through this interplay, and it is known to us in cyclicity. Cyclicity is not also out there, it is right here, because each of us breathes in and breathes out. I'm sure all of you do, otherwise you'd be dead. But imagine within our body there is this cycle, this in-breathing and out-breathing. This is what we think of as a life, the breath. There's a wonderful story that they tell in the Upanishads, the esoteric scriptures of India, how the different deities were fighting in the body about who was supreme, who was the supreme deity. So sight left for a year, and of course the form felt its way through the world. Smell left for a year, couldn't smell anything. Hearing left for a year, taste, touch. And then when breath decided to leave, all the others said, no, you stay, because they realized its supremacy, because our breath is the rhythm of life. We are constantly producing this rhythm. It is the very first thing that the child hears, is the heartbeat of the mother. It lives without sight, hearing, all of those things, but there is the rhythm, that pulsating rhythm. That's the thing it first is aware of. So this one ultimate reality is there. If we think that really there is only this, that as the Indian scriptures called it, because it is beyond description, the ultimate, the one life. And we know it through cyclicity. That in turn, even now science tells us that the world around us is full of molecules, atoms, protoplasm. Even in the world around us, there are billions of bacteria that are all floating around. There is just this one thing manifesting in many, many ways. And if this one life is omnipresent, eternal, truly perfect, why does it need to create? Why does it need to create? Why do we need to feel suffering, limitation? Why do we get angry? Why do we get all of these things if its nature is perfection? What do you think? What do you think? You, that's to you. You don't think about it. Yes, we don't think about it. Yes.
Wrong identification, because we identify with the body, and the senses and pain is a form of warning, but we see it as something that we want to get rid of.
Anyone else? Yes. Yes. Yes.
Because of events long lost from man's memory, I feel that the universe is flawed. Gnostic.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, the Gnostics believed they were the perfect principles, and then on another level, it was constantly recreating itself. Yes. Yes, Toddy. To know itself. These are all good indications, but the unlimited, the perfect, to be complete, must know limitation. Right? It's like a Zen paradox. To be perfect, to be truly all experiencing, it must know this illusion, though, of limitation. And all of our developments of cosmos, we have a beautiful picture on the cover of this year's Blavatsky lecture. All of these universes, cosmos, in turn, for that divine, for that completion, as the secret doctrine tells us, and there's a wonderful line right at the beginning, the eternity of the pilgrim is like a wink in the eye of self-existence. So all of this, the whole developments in the universe is just this moment. We are, in turn, the thought divine, as the Pemander is called. We are that thought of the divine, like a bubble coming out of the water, which some of you have seen. We are that moment, it's thought, and then all reality develops around it. Again, though, it has its outbreathing, its manifestation, and then inbreathing. But all of that is a moment in the divine. So how then do we then work with that flow, so to speak? How do we work with that divine rhythm? One of the great things that has happened in modern times is there is a greater attention, and science, philosophy, all of these things are positing these ideas now. Theosophists say, our numbers are dwindling and all of these things, but actually not. The ideas are being broadcast. One doesn't have to be only a member. I'll show later on that members of the society form a little nucleus, as it were, a germination of those ideas. So there is this one ultimate reality, the one life, pulsating through all things, of which we can posit really nothing. As much as an ant can posit or comprehend the life of a human being in human society and social structures. And this one is revealed through cyclicity. And how do we seal this cyclicity but through this wonderful word, karma? In the English tend to pronounce it karma, but karma is actually an Indian dish that you eat, karma. A korma. It's actually a short A, not a long A, but this is a word that through Theosophy has entered the English language. You turn in any dictionary, and so we'll use the anglicized version of karma, though it's short A. And what is karma? Since there is the one, All things must act and react. HPB gives the wonderful example of a still pool, and one thing dropped into it causes these ripples. They reach the end and come back to the source again. So we are constantly acting and reacting. And the great thing about it is that it's not one person or a dozen people. It's myriads of people in this divine life that is acting and reacting. And co-equal with this idea of karma, to make it really work, is the idea of reincarnation, which has now become a tremendously popular idea. But in Theosophy, it really gives you the mechanics of reincarnation more than there are many Eastern philosophies that talk about reincarnation that give some idea. The Theosophical idea of reincarnation is very much different than metempsychosis, the Hindu idea that in one life you could be a human being, and then if you're bad, you're reborn as a snake. So this in Theosophy there is this progressing, always progression to higher types. And this is the other benefit, I think, that Theosophy gives you. I've met many deeply religious people, but they all universally, when it comes to that moment, have a fear of death. The Christian, you would think, would be happy to go into the bosom of Abraham, so would be anyone else, but when that moment comes, there is that uncertainty. Maybe they are all conscious that living for an eternity in heaven with harps and just praising the divine may not be all it's... yes. But Theosophy gives you a really detailed analysis of the after-death states. The closest to it, of course, are in the Tibetan teachings. So it says that eventually, the wonderful thing about old age, people knock old age, but those of us who are, it's really a wonderful thing. Because if you didn't have all of these aches and pains and all, we'd really be terrified of death. Death would be horrible. But as the poet Keats says, can death be sleep when life is but a dream and our greatest fear is but to awake? Isn't that great? So, of course, since we have all these aches and pains, and ladies, be honest, those of you, you have an outfit you like. It's beautiful. You wear it. You look good in it. Something happens. It gets ripped. It gets faded. You can just get another one. You don't regret having the old garment, do you? Because there's always an upgrade. There's always a new style. So the same thing with the personality. And Theosophy tells us that, in fact, through myriads, we've had now almost 150 years of research into this area from Theosophists. Numerous philosophers, teachers have looked into this area. So, of course, the body dissipates mercifully. Then, of course, you have this after-death state, as the Tibetans call it, the bardo, which, by the way, first appears in Theosophy. It appears in the Mahatma letters before there was any translation of this world, this bardo. The Tibetans believe that there are these intermediate states. And in fact, there are 6 bardos. So life itself is a bardo, because it has a beginning and it has an end. It's an intermediate state. The moment of death is a bardo, because it's a process. Sleep is a bardo, because you're going from one state to another. Meditation is another bardo, because you're going from one state to another. So eventually the body dissipates. I don't think we've ever in the history of humanity has somebody who's been living for 2,000 years. And if they are, they must be extremely miserable, so no one wants to be around them. So the body eventually dissipates wonderfully. All things go back to the elements, as they say. Then, of course, you have still this strong emotional nature. Unless you've resolved and worked out all of these issues, that then still is there in existence. Eventually, though, because of lack of feeding, it has no outlet, that dissipates. And as it tells us, we go into this wonderful, blissful state called devachan. That is this wonderful, wonderful state, not quite akin to the heaven of religious groups, because supposedly there is no time in devachan. There is no past, and there is no present. It is that wonderful, wonderful moment. Think of the most wonderful, glorious moment you've had that has transcended your ego and the I. like an end of a beautiful symphony, the crescendo, or as I saw today, a cat hissing at someone. That was a wonderful, wonderful moment. And there is no past and present, because they say if there was past, you would miss what happened, and if there was a future, you would look forward constantly. So there would not be, it is consciousness itself. Now this is the other aspect, that we are beings of consciousness. And consciousness is non-local. So the body may die, but consciousness is there. The end result of all these experiences, the harvest of life, as Alan Hughes called it in his Blavatsky lecture, it is this wonderful harvest of experience, as they say, the aroma of the flowers, so to speak, of your life. And that is the thing that is transmitted, the experience, the knowledge. And of course, you know about all of those great prodigies who occur. Suddenly they're born, and lo and behold, they have this natural gift, whether it be music or art, and they become great philosophers and teachers. There is also the path. Now, I know truth is supposed to be pathless land, but to get to the pathless land, you need a path. You know, you're not just wandering in a maze of jungle. You know, you have to get to somewhere to make it your own. Of course, you make it your own, but the path is this way, in turn, of unfolding that divinity within you, because, of course, each of you has that life and truth and guidance. No one else can give you that, but within each of you is the truth and the light and the certainty that no one else can give you. And actually on Friday morning we'll be looking into the more deeper aspects of Theosophy that is expressed in HPB's esoteric instructions. Toward the end of her life, she started a school of her own where she could in turn give more material, presupposing that people knew a great deal. For instance, the 7 principles. One of the things that's unique to Theosophy is the idea that the individual has 7 different layers or field of expression. So, of course, we all know we have a body, right? We can't deny that. But then there is this life principle in us. Some days we wake up, we feel good, we have a lot of energy. Some days we don't. And, of course, then we all know we have that emotional nature. You know, HPB once said of her aunt, you know, there are people who can take the greatest sacrifice but step on their corns and they go crazy. So there is that emotional driving nature. And then, of course, there is the mind behind it. Some people can be plotting and scheming. Some people can use that mind and that energy to help other people. And then, of course, we have this wonderful universality that we see with great spiritual teachers who have worked for the benefit of humanity and who we always look back as inspirations. This is the wonderful thing. Each of us has someone that has inspired us to go beyond the limited self. And this is one of the things I would like each of you to see. For a moment, can you see yourself as beings of divine, unlimited potential? At the core of your being, of your real, actual nature is unlimited potential because it is divine. No heartaches, no fears, no suffering. It is this wonderful goodness that manages, in spite of ourselves, to sneak out into the world and do good to others, whether it be something so simple as reaching out to help someone else or doing something great. There is this wonderful goodness at the basis of our being. And all we have to do is simply remove those veils over consciousness, like a windshield wiper. Constantly, even a car has a windshield wiper. So all we have to do is remove those limitations that we himself are created, because from our earliest moments, from childhood, conditioned into us, we are told you can't. Don't do this, don't do that. That in turn, things are changing now because people are encouraged to do things. Yes, you can. This was the election slogan some elections ago, yes we can, and we can make a change. Each of us has that ability to be that change we want to see in the world. This phrase was brought up by Jiddu Krishnamurti, a member of the society, and he said, what is the world? It is you and I. It's not something out there. And what is the world's problem? It is what exists between each of us. And if we were to change that dynamic, how we interact between us, it would ripple out. The power of thought is the most wonderful and divine thing. And it is a gift that all of you have. You have that ability through thought, by not seeing yourself as limitation, by not being deceived by the face in the mirror. That's not you. That's an image. Don't confuse the image with who you really are. You know, race, creed, caste, sex, color, all of those things are a mirage, so to speak. These are masks of the divine to take on the roles that we play in society. So as I say, on Friday morning we'll look at a little deeper on all of these ideas, especially one of the things I think Theosophists should familiarize themselves with is really the 7 principles. I think if you really don't know them back, forth, center, sideways, up, down, around, you're really missing out on something. Because also each of us can be a force for good and change in this world. And it all comes by how we interact. You don't need to go out into the world and carry a secret doctrine under your arm and go from door to door. People will not take that. But it comes from how we interact. There's a wonderful story, St. Francis, they tell of St. Francis. He left the monastery one day, and one of the acolytes, he said, we're going to go into town to preach. And they left the monastery and they wandered down the side of the road, and they came to the outskirts of the city, and they found themselves walking through the city itself, and then suddenly they were back on the road to the monastery, and the acolyte said, I thought that we were going to preach. And St. Francis said, we have. By our very nature, by our very who we are is the teaching. So each of us has the ability for the power of thought. And one thing that really should be incumbent on all Theosophists is to have a positive attitude. To say, yes, we can. That if you think the world is bad, it can be changed. At least you can change yourself. You don't have to take the negativity that surrounds this world and adopt it and take it as your own. Deny it, as those Christians in the South and America say, geez, Satan, you won't take my joy. So each of you must say this in turn. Don't allow negativity. Don't adopt that pose. The thing that we should at least do as Theosophists is to be positive, because you're denying the divine within yourself. When you are unhappy, when you feel afraid, when the bee stings, when the dog barks, all you have to realize is you are an extension of that divine. You are the divine incarnating in this world to make a change. And those of you who have formed a nucleus to do this work, to do practical work in this world, really have more of a commitment to do this. I see Damon is giving me the signal. So I'd like to sum up with a quote or two. First, to illustrate this idea of the unity, one of my favorite quotes from the Mahatma letters is this. I think it's such a beautiful piece of writing. The teachers behind the movement wrote these wonderful letters. And this is it. Nature has linked all parts of her empire together by subtle threads of magnetic sympathy. And there is a mutual correlation even between a star and a man. Isn't that beautiful? A piece of nature has linked all parts of her empire together by subtle threads of magnetic sympathy. And there is a mutual correlation even between a star and a man. or woman or other in this stage. So to sort of regurgitate, that's not really the word, but yes, that's, thank you, Susan. I can always rely on you to recapitulate, not regurgitate. Recapitulate this. Here's another quote from the Mahatma letters. These ideas, they touch man's true position in the universe in relation to his previous and future lives, his origin and ultimate destiny, the relation of the mortal to the immortal, of the temporary to the eternal, of the finite to the infinite. Ideas larger, grander, more comprehensive, recognizing the universal reign of immutable law, unchanging and unchangeable in regard to which there is only an eternal now, which to uninitiated mortals time is past or future as related to their finite existence. This is what we study and what many have solved. And also, this is, we have been given the pearl of great price. Those of us who have membership and long-term membership and has stuck in the society through all things good, the testing ground, the society is like that crucible. It really is the testing ground for all of these ideas. And in spite of all of these things, those of you who have made that long-term commitment, you have that knowledge. You have something that so many people don't have. Think of those people in the outside world, lost, fearful, weighed down by so many things. Behold the host of souls. Watch how they hover over the stormy sea of human life, and how, this is what it tells us, tossed, and there's so much fear and darkness in this world. But yet we have that wonderful, wonderful thing that is called Theosophy. And I'll close because if you have any comments or suggestions, because I'm sure many of you have studied these areas and have made a commitment. So this is the part now for the members. And it's by Linda Oliveri, who is a president of the Theosophical Society in Australia. She says, consider for a moment what kind of person we were on joining the TS and the kind of person we are now. Has exposure to the wisdom teachings over time helped us to change for the better in some respects, notwithstanding our inevitable shortcomings as humans in progress? For example, have we become a little more accepting of other human beings who happen to differ from society's general expectations, or of those who have different cultural roots, or else the type of person who used to irritate us easily? Are we perhaps a little kinder or less prone to judgment of others? Then again, has Theosophy helped to expand our mind? The ultimate effectiveness of Theosophy is whether it changes us for the better, whether we can relate to the world better. Is it possible to have a mind without barriers? We are multi-layered beings, so this can present a challenge. And this is the great thing that Theosophy presents, even to members. It's a challenge. It's always urging us to keep going up that hill, the hill that goes up all the way, or that path many of us were on earlier on today that seemed never-ending, going up that hill. But so do you think that Theosophy is a wonderful thing? Do you think it's something of benefit? Is that 2 yeses over here and a no over here? Excuse me, I can't hear you. Is there a benefit in Theosophy? Yes. What? Yes. One more time. Say it like you mean it. Yes. There. Oh, Jenny can probably hear it in where she is. But there really is, and it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing. And once it has touched your life, it is the magic we all imagined when we were young. And we believed that the world was a wonderful place instead of seeing it as a horrible, horrible place. And it is important for each of us to have that positive attitude and to look toward the ideal of the good. One of the things Madame Blavatsky reminded us is a constant eye to the ideal of human progression and perfection that the secret science depicts. There is always, we need to be reinforced. And this is the wonderful thing of events like this. We get to meet, we get to discuss, we get to share, we get to see, all of the great potentiality that each of us has. So, on that happy note, I'll end now, and then I can give Mrs. Seacrest a chance to do something. Perhaps if you have any questions for her, you can, that you'd like to give her as the chair. Wait a minute, we're not finished yet. Hey, wait a minute. Hey, wait a minute. I still have 5 minutes. Pulling me right off stage already. The curtain was about to close on me. Wait a minute. I didn't come all the way here for that. Drag myself here. So, any of you, not you, any of you who have any questions or comments or anything you'd like to share, because I think the other thing is, members, we don't share enough. The New Age movement that we all know that has brought these idea broadcasts is all about opening the heart chakra. It's all about, the Theosophists are stuck in the throat chakra. We will discuss something to the end. There's a story I heard from Diana Dunningham Chapotin, who is previous head of the Theosophical Order of Service, in a lecture no less at Adyar. Do you know this story? A Jew, a Christian, and a Theosophist die and meet on the other side. Have you heard this story? No. Oh, okay. A Jew and a Christian die, and they meet on the other side. And the road goes along, and then it forks. And the Jew and the Christian go to this side, and the Theosophist goes on the other side. And where the Jew and the Christian go, it says road to heaven. Where the Theosophist goes, it says discussion about heaven. So we as Theosophists will discuss something, and we will look upon it on every possible side, which is a good thing. But also, we need to now move up to this chakra, to this higher, the intuitive, that is a blending of the heart and the mind also, and have that wider view, because each of you has so much to give to this world. This world is so full of suffering. It's really awful. And those of us who have the world that all people in the world are coming to, they're flocking, they're coming on sea, walking on water. If there's a tunnel, they'll go underground. But we have this wonderful thing. The great Tibetan teacher, Tsongkhapa, says, you're on the state of the path. You're on the path if you have two things, leisure and opportunity, to study these things. And if you think how many people in this world don't have leisure and opportunity, they are struggling just to feed themselves, to get water, to live, to pay some little bit of thing. They don't have time to study in all of these things. So all of you who have been fortunate enough to understand, to be exposed to these things, it is up to you now to assimilate it, digest it. In the class we had in the Mahatma Letters, there's a wonderful line that knowledge, like food, needs time to digest. So we are digesting and processing, and no one in this should say, I don't understand it. It's too hard for me. Well, of course it is. You'd be a Mahatma if you knew it all. But it's in the effort. It's in the effort of struggling, like those first fish that crawled laboriously onto land. We are moving onto a new continent of thought. So we are struggling also to have that knowledge. And yet you have the thing that everyone wants, that countless sages throughout centuries have found, have looked for, and yet you have it. Now the question is, what are you going to do with it, right? So thank you. Now you can hit the music.